From January 24 to September 30, Burkina Faso was under military rule led by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, and after September 30, led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who unseated Damiba. The authorities agreed with the Economic Community of West African States to a transition period of 24 months, which would end in July 2024. Prior to the January coup d'état, the government was run by President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, who was re-elected president in November 2020, for a second 5-year term. National and international observers characterized the 2020 presidential and legislative elections as peaceful and satisfactory with credible results. In the 2020 elections, President Kabore's party, the People's Movement for Progress, won 56 seats in the 127-seat National Assembly, remaining the largest party in a legislative majority coalition. The Ministry of Territorial Administration and Security and the Ministry of Defense are responsible for internal security. The Ministry of Territorial Administration and Security oversees the National Police. The Army, Air Force, and National Gendarmerie, which operate within the Ministry of Defense, are responsible for external security but sometimes assist with missions related to domestic security. In January 2020, the government established the Volunteers for the Defense of the Fatherland, Les Volontaires pour la Défense de la Patrie, a civilian support corps for state counterterrorism efforts with rudimentary oversight from military and law enforcement. In June, the transition government created a new operational structure to oversee more effectively the participation of the community-based volunteers in the country's defense and prevent human rights abuses of which they had been accused. The new entity, called the Patriotic Watch and Defense Brigade, is responsible for the operational coordination of all civil defense forces, with an emphasis on intelligence collecting, the primary role for which the volunteers were originally designed. On October 24, the transition government announced the recruitment of 50,000 volunteers as part of the fight against terrorism according to the government. The volunteer militias are to be based in each of the more than 300 municipalities in the country. Civilian authorities did not maintain effective control over security forces, and there were credible reports that state-sponsored militias committed numerous abuses. Significant human rights issues included credible reports of unlawful or arbitrary killings, including extrajudicial killings by security forces and killings by state-sponsored militias and extremist groups, enforced disappearances by security forces and disappearances by extremist groups, harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, serious abuses in an internal conflict, including widespread civilian harm, abductions, torture, physical abuse or punishment, and restrictions on free expression and media, including violence or threats of violence against journalists, serious acts of corruption, lack of investigation and accountability for gender-based violence, including but not limited to domestic or intimate partner violence, sexual violence, child, early and forced marriage, and female genital mutilation, cutting, crimes involving violence or threats of violence targeting members of national, racial, and ethnic minority groups, and trafficking in persons. The government investigated and punished some cases of abuse. Nevertheless, impunity for human rights abuses and corruption remained widespread. The country experienced deadly attacks by violent extremist organizations during the year. Jamaat Nasr al-Islam wal Muslimin, Group for the Support of Islam and Muslims, the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, and other armed groups, such as the homegrown Ansar al-Islam, perpetrated numerous attacks resulting in hundreds of civilian deaths as well as scores of deaths among government security forces and state-sponsored militias. Security incidents included improvised explosive device attacks, targeted killings, kidnappings, attacks on mining sites, especially gold mines, burning of schools, medical centers, and homes, and theft of cattle, vehicles, and food assistance. These incidents contributed to a humanitarian crisis and the internal displacement of more than 1.7 million persons. The transition government estimated as of mid-year that violent extremist organizations controlled approximately 40% of the country's territory. The government detained several hundred suspected violent extremists, including